Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Always fun to go deep.
So today we're diving into Sadhguru's book, Mind is Your Business.
Oh yeah, that one's packed with insightful ideas.
It really is. We're going to be exploring how our minds work, but on a much deeper level than just, think positive vibes.
Right, more like think the mind as a circus, a garbage bin, and even a ladder to the divine.
Exactly. Those are Sadhguru's words, not mine.
Pretty wild metaphors, right?
Totally. But they really highlight the mind's power and its pitfalls, the duality of it all.
Definitely. He's getting at the fact that our minds are capable of these amazing things.
Yeah, like creativity, problem solving, you name it.
But then there's the flip side.
The anxiety, the overthinking.
The endless mental chatter.
So how do we make sense of this mental circus that Sadhguru talks about?
Well, he says it's all about how we identify with things outside of ourselves.
Okay, like our possessions, our relationships, our jobs.
All of that, even our thoughts and emotions.
So we're basically letting the circus performers run the show instead of being the ringmaster.
Exactly. We get so caught up in the act that we lose sight of the fact that we're in control.
And this lack of control is what leads to the chaos.
Right. And it's interesting. Sadhguru actually shares a personal story in the book that really illustrates this point.
Oh, I love his stories. They're always so insightful. What's this one about?
Well, as a teenager, he questioned his mother about her love for him.
Okay, that's pretty typical teenager behavior. What's so unusual about that?
Well, his mom was incredibly devoted to him.
Right, every mom is.
Well, hold on, hear me out. So he asks her straight up, would you still love me if I was born in the house next door?
Oh, what a question to ask your mom.
Right. But that's Sadhguru for you, always pushing the boundaries.
I guess he was trying to get at something deeper with that question.
Exactly. He was so caught up in the idea of himself as this physical being born in a specific place
that he doubted his mom's unconditional love.
Yep. That's how strong these identifications can be.
Wow. That really makes you think.
It shows how these stories we tell ourselves, these identifications, can really distort our perception of reality.
And I guess that distortion is what leads to a lot of the mess in our minds, right?
Absolutely. We get so entangled in these external things thinking they define us.
And then we end up creating all this mental churn.
Exactly. So the question is, how do we untangle ourselves?
How do we escape this mental clutter? I think that's what a lot of our listeners are wondering right now.
Well, that's where Sadhguru's next metaphor comes in the mind as a garbage bin.
A garbage bin, okay. I'm intrigued, but also a little grossed out.
Fair enough. But hear me out. It's actually a pretty brilliant analogy. Think about it. The mind's job is to collect information.
Like every sight, every sound, every experience we've ever had gets stored in there.
And that's useful, right? Like a garbage bin keeps our homes clean.
But the problem is when we start living inside the bin, obsessing over the contents.
Right. It's like clinging to trash as if it were treasure.
So instead of getting attached to every thought and emotion that pops up,
we need to learn to recognize them for what they are.
Just information, not necessarily the truth or our identity.
You got it. Detaching doesn't mean ignoring our thoughts and emotions.
It's about not letting them control us.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we have a choice in how we respond to them.
I love that. That's so empowering.
It is. It's about taking back control of our minds.
So if we're not supposed to live in the garbage bin, so to speak, where are we supposed to go?
Well, that's where the concept of the mind as a ladder to the divine comes in.
Okay, a ladder to the divine. This is where it gets really interesting for me.
Me too. We're up to climb to a whole other level, so how do we climb this ladder?
Right, that's the big question. How do we actually use our minds to connect with something bigger than ourselves?
Sadhguru says it starts with meditation.
Okay, but I thought we were trying to escape the garbage bin of the mind, not just sit around and think more?
It's not about thinking more, it's about changing our relationship to our thoughts.
So it's not about emptying the bin completely. It's more about learning to sort through the trash.
Exactly. Meditation helps us create space between us and our thoughts, so we can observe them without getting swept away by them.
So instead of being overwhelmed by all the garbage, we can start to see it for what it is and maybe even recycle some of it.
Right. It's like becoming the curator of our own mental museum.
I like that analogy. The curator of our own minds. So we get to decide which exhibits to display and which ones to put in storage.
Precisely. We have the power to choose what we focus on.
But how do we actually do that? Isn't the mind always jumping around from one thought to the next?
It is, but that's where the practice comes in. Sadhguru emphasizes that Trying to force the mind to be quiet is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater.
Okay, I can picture that.
Yeah.
It's just going to pop up eventually and probably splash you in the face.
Exactly. So instead of fighting with our thoughts, we learn to gently redirect our attention
Redirect it to where?
to the awareness itself, the space where those thoughts arise.
The space between the thoughts. That sounds kind of abstract.
It can be, but think about it like this. When you listen to music, you can get lost in the melody, the lyrics, the emotions it evokes.
Yeah, I definitely do that.
But you can also pay attention to the experience of hearing itself, the vibrations in the air, the way the sound waves hit your eardrums.
Oh, I see. So it's about shifting our focus from the content of our thoughts to the awareness that's experiencing those thoughts.
You got it. It's like being present with the experience rather than getting lost in the story.
And I bet that's where Sadhguru's humor comes in handy.
Oh, definitely. He describes the mind's resistance to meditation as this clever trickster, always trying to distract you.
I can relate to that. It's like the second I sit down to meditate, my to-do list explodes in my head.
He has this great anecdote where he compares the mind to those people in South India who write "come tomorrow" on their doorsteps to ward off evil spirits.
Wait, really? People actually do that?
Yeah, it's a tradition.
Mm.
And Sadhguru says we do the same thing with things that are good for us, like meditation or healthy eating.
We're all, I'll start tomorrow kind of people.
Exactly. We're experts at procrastinating on our own well-being.
So true. But I guess the point is that meditation isn't about achieving some blissful state. It's about showing up consistently.
And being patient with ourselves. It's a practice, not a destination.
Like training a muscle.
Right. And the benefits go far beyond just feeling calmer. Sadhguru says that through meditation, we can access a level of intelligence that transcends the limitations of logic.
Okay, wait a minute. Are we talking about some kind of mystical superpower here?
Not necessarily a superpower, but a different way of knowing. He says that logic operates on limited information. It's like trying to understand the ocean by analyzing a single drop of water.
So we need to zoom out to get the bigger picture.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that this idea isn't just some ancient mystical belief. Modern neuroscience is actually finding evidence that our perception of reality is constructed by the brain.
So our brains are basically creating a simulation of reality.
In a way, yes. And this means that our thoughts, our beliefs, our past experiences all shape how we perceive the world.
So if we're all walking around with these different versions of reality, how do we ever agree on anything?
That's a great question. And it gets to the heart of why Sadhguru emphasizes the importance of cultivating this deeper intelligence. He says it allows us to see beyond our limited individual perspectives and tap into a more universal understanding.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually do that? Is it just about meditating more?
Meditation is definitely a key part of it, but Sadhguru also emphasizes the importance of self-reflection, questioning our assumptions, and being willing to challenge our own beliefs.
So it's not about shutting off our critical thinking skills, but rather using them to dig deeper.
Exactly. He has this great story about a king in South India who was tricked by his barber into believing his ancestors in heaven were bored and needed to be entertained.
No way. How do you trick a king into believing something like that?
Well, the barber was a pretty crafty guy. He told the king this elaborate story about how his ancestors were longing for entertainment. And he convinced the king to send his most talented entertainer to heaven via a giant pyre.
Hold on, did the entertainer actually get burned alive?
No. The entertainer was in on the plan. He pretended to purify himself for days before the event, then secretly escaped.
Okay, good. So what happened next?
Months later, the entertainer reappeared in the court, claiming to have just returned from heaven.
That's hilarious. So what did he tell the king about his ancestors?
He said they were thrilled, but they had one small complaint. There were no barbers in heaven. He even suggested that the king send his royal barber up to tend to his forefathers' overgrown beards.
Oh, no. I bet the barber was sweating bullets at that point.
He was terrified and immediately confessed his elaborate hoax. The king, of course, was furious, but also amused.
What a story.
It's a good reminder that even the most outlandish stories can be believable if they feed our ego.
And that it's always wise to question our assumptions, especially when it comes to spiritual matters.
Exactly. Which brings us to another fascinating aspect of Sadhguru's teachings, his perspective on devotion. It's not what you might think. So where were we?
We were talking about devotion. But I have to admit, I'm still a bit fuzzy on how Sadhguru defines it. It seems kind of at odds with this whole idea of questioning everything and relying on our own inner intelligence.
Yeah, it's definitely not the typical understanding of devotion, like blind faith or following a guru without question.
So what is it then? What does Sadhguru mean when he talks about devotion?
He says true devotion is about a fundamental shift in perspective, a willingness to surrender the individual will to something larger than oneself.
Surrender the individual will. That sounds a little scary. Doesn't that mean giving up our own power, our own sense of self?
It might seem that way at first, but Sadhguru argues that it's actually the opposite. When we surrender to something greater than ourselves, we tap into a source of power and wisdom that's far beyond our limited ego.
I'm not sure I'm following you. Could you give me an example?
Sure. He tells this amazing story about a cobbler named Pusalar who built a temple to Shiva entirely in his mind, brick by brick over many years.
A temple in his mind. What do you mean?
Literally a temple in his mind. He visualized it in such detail that it became more real to him than any physical structure.
Okay, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But how does that relate to devotion?
Well, the story goes that Shiva appeared to the king in a dream, saying that he couldn't attend the opening of the king's brand new temple because he had to go to Pusalar's temple first.
Wow, so Shiva chose to visit the cobbler's mental temple over the king's lavish physical one.
Exactly. The king was baffled, of course. He searched high and low for Pusalar's temple, but couldn't find it anywhere.
Because it only existed in the cobbler's mind.
Right. Finally, the king found Pusalar and asked him about this mysterious temple. And Pusalar explained that he had built it through his devotion, his unwavering focus. And to Shiva, this mental temple was more real, more sacred than any physical structure.
That's such a beautiful story.
Yeah.
It really highlights the power of the mind and the depth of true devotion.
It shows that devotion isn't about external rituals or grand gestures. It's about an internal alignment, a merging of our inner world with the divine.
I'm starting to see how this connects back to the idea of Tantra that we talked about earlier. Sadhguru describes it as a technology for creating beyond our current intelligence.
And he suggests that one of the keys to Tantra is harnessing the power of conscious imagination.
So it's not just about visualizing things in our minds, but actually manifesting them in the physical world.
That's the potential. But Sadhguru emphasizes that it's not some quick and easy magic trick. It requires disciplined dedication and a deep understanding of the principles involved.
Sounds like it takes a lot of mental focus.
It does. He suggests starting with simple exercises like consciously creating a flower in your mind, paying attention to every detail, the color, the texture, the scent.
Okay, I can try that. So as we practice this mental focus, we can eventually start to create more complex things.
That's the idea. But Sadhguru is also very clear that as our creative power grows, so does our responsibility.
It's like the old saying, with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly. He emphasizes that we need to align our actions with our highest values, using this power for the benefit of all beings, not just for our own selfish desires.
So it's not just about what we create, but why we create it. Our intentions matter.
Absolutely. He says true power comes from a place of love, compassion, and a deep understanding of our interconnectedness with everything.
Wow, we've covered so much ground today. From the mind as a circus to the power of devotion and conscious creation, it's been an incredible journey through the world of Sadhguru and his book, Mind is Your Business.
It really has, and we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore in his teachings.
Well, I hope this deep dive has inspired our listeners to learn more, to explore the power of their own minds, and to maybe even question a few things along the way.
Definitely. And remember, the most important journey is the one we undertake within ourselves.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of the mind.